A quick survey, how many of you have kids in your life? Your own, maybe nieces, nephews? Hey, the majority.
Yeah.
All right. Well, tell me if this reminds you of anyone then. Or maybe this. I would love for this to happen. That would be amazing. And if you can't quite read this last one here, it says, there once was a bear who had purple hair. That's rare, so Bob attacked him. It's pretty easy to be envious of kids' imagination, isn't it? They are unabashed, they run amok, and their curiosities lead them to say some pretty ridiculous things at times. And I'm sure we can all recall back to a time in our own lives when life was this completely wide open. For me, I remember in kindergarten, I always loved playing hide and seek. I thought, well, what if I just practiced hard enough? Then maybe I can become a professional hide and seeker when I grow up. And I remember sitting there trying to figure out what this was going to mean to me in my life. And the neurologist, he's leaning back in his leather chair. He's looking at me. He's like, well, son, your hand shakes. Why don't you just embrace the shake? And part of me felt like that was kind of cavalier. But also, there's part of me that's like, it's probably not bad advice. And so it was probably a couple weeks later, I was still thinking about this question, what would happen if I embraced the shake? But as I searched around the darkness, I realized that I was paralyzed by all these choices that I never had before. And it was then that I thought back to this limitation of my jittery hand. Embrace the shake. And I realized if I ever wanted my creativity back, I had to quit trying so hard to think outside of the box and instead get back into it. I wondered, could you become more creative if you were actually looking for limitations? Like, what if I could create with only like $1 worth of supplies? Well, this was when I was going through one of my phases where I was spending every evening at Starbucks. I'm sure some of you have experienced that too. I'm looking at that extra cup and I'm thinking, well, if they'll give me one extra cup for free, what happens if I ask for like 50? And it was the evening shift, I remind you, so they did not care one bit. They just gave me a big old pile of cups. And then with the pencils I already had, I made this project for only 80 cents. This became a moment of clarification for me, that we need to first be limited in order to become limitless. I next took this approach of thinking inside the box to my canvas, and I wondered, what if instead of painting on a canvas, what if I had to paint on something else, like my chest? Was never visible as a physical whole. It was destroyed before it ever existed. In the course of this Goodbye Art series, I created 23 different pieces with nothing physical left to display. What I thought would be the ultimate limitation really turned out to be the ultimate liberation, as each time I created, the destruction brought me back to a neutral place where I felt refreshed and ready to start the next project. And something really surprising ended up coming out of it. As I was destroying each piece, I was learning to let go. Let go of outcomes, let go of failures, and let go of imperfections. And in return, I found a process of creating art that was perpetual and unencumbered by result. I found myself in a state of constant creation, thinking only of what's next, and coming up with more ideas than ever before. Embracing the shake is about building our foundational skills so we can untap our potential when we need it most, so we can always find our way to that story of transformation. And for me, the journey to finding transformation really forced me to rethink my whole approach to limitations. And I've since come to realize that when we change the way we look at a limitation, it changes how it affects us. If we run into a limitation and we see it as a roadblock, that's going to prevent us from seeing the possibilities. But if we choose to embrace limitations, it opens us up to new opportunities. But, of course, realizing this alone doesn't help us change. In order to change our paradigm about limitations, we must first understand the nature of the limits that are holding us back. After all, facing limitations is not a new phenomenon, is it? No. It's really a phenomenon of existence, that at every turn, at every point in our lives, we are constantly confronted with limitations. Yet, unlike playing a sport or an instrument where we get better with practice, most of us tend to get a little bit worse with each limitation we run into because we expect them to be awful and unpleasant. And so we try avoiding them at all costs. But it ends up costing us our future, our potential, and certainly our happiness. I posted my phone number online. I asked people to call me and share a story with me about a limitation that they faced. I spent an entire month in front of a live webcam, listening, reading, and then writing story after story to create this piece called Refraction. And after pouring through over 1,500 stories, I discovered that the key to changing the way we think about limitations lies in the distinction between a limitation and a self-limiting belief. I traced these self-limiting beliefs back to this transition into adulthood, where we went from living in possibility to living in certainty. As kids, we believe that nothing can hold us back from any task. Yet, we live in a world that yearns for certainty. So over time, we develop limiting beliefs based on our interpretation of our experiences and what society has conditioned us to see. Can you imagine what you could do if you embraced all of the limitations that are in front of you? I know that you all have worked hard and you have a record year to prove for it. That is awesome, by the way. Congratulations. But you have also experienced tough business trends. So you know what it's like to run into a lot of limitations and uncertainties along the way. And I'm sure you have heard the story of transformation before. I think I'm here simply to remind you of your own story, your potential for continued transformation. Embrace the Shake isn't just about changing our attitude towards something outside of us. It's about changing our attitude towards ourselves. Real change comes from the inside. Embrace the Shake is embracing ourselves and believing in our tremendous capacity to adjust to whatever comes our way. There are solutions to every problem if we're willing to stay open to unexpected sources. To get there, we don't need more tools, more time, or more money. Those things are nice, but they're not necessary. Our greatest resource are our internal resources, our creativity, our adaptability, our resilience, and of course, our imagination. And when you invite yourself to see limitations as opportunities, you'll see that there's not a future we are supposed to have. There is a future that we get to create by perpetually rethinking, reframing, and recrafting. Instead of telling each other to seize the day, maybe we can remind ourselves every day to seize the limitation. Thank you.